Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first official lecture for COM 350 in the spring of 2022. It's almost hard to believe that it's already 2022, but I'm sure that for those of you who are graduating this year, you're ready just to get this over with. And for the rest of us who have maybe a year or two left, we're going to try to enjoy ourselves and not to freak out too much about this course. My goal is, as I've told you before, to get you all to pass. If I give you all A's, that's fine. I don't care. But during the semester, I will make sure that if it seems like maybe you should drop the course, I will let you know. That way I keep my record of not failing, well, that many people. At least I think in 15 years, it's like 3 people, and that's based on their choices more than mine, believe me. So my goal here is to teach you about the art of communicating partially through speech, but also through writing, the relationship between language and our ability to communicate and have some sort of mass influence on a large group is sort of something that is more important now than it's been in the past, partly because we're able to use the internet. We're able to make TikTok videos really quickly. We're able to share information that may or may not be verified or be true. And we get to influence a large audience, and that mass influence is part of what rhetoric does. Some people have asked me, what's the difference between rhetoric and persuasion? Well, first of all, we have 2 different classes for it, and I teach them both. So hopefully I know the answer to this question, right? And the answer is that almost all communication is persuasive in some way. And I'm going to say almost all, only because I know there are people who believe that that there's types of communication that are simply informative, I think is the way that they put it, that they're not intended to persuade. And while that may not be their intent, anyone who's been through COM 115 knows that just the simple choosing of the topic, the way you're going to go about the topic, and choosing what information to give your audience, all of that is, adds up to choices you've made to persuade your audience. So to me, there's pretty much very little communication that's not persuasive. Nonetheless, rhetoric falls into persuasive speech. And so we know that its end goal is to change people, either get them to change their mind, shift their opinion, look at a different perspective, to do something, motivating them to think about something more than once, definitely question all of the information that we get. We encourage people in some way to take some sort of action. Even if it's an internal action of simply rededicating ourselves to a cause, or if we have an advertisement that's trying to help us better improve our lives through an app on our phone or whatnot. I'm still not sure how those work, but those apps are designed also to persuade us to do things. If you've ever wondered how is it that Noom or any of the other eating or lifestyle choice apps works, it's all psychology. It just tells you what you need, what they think you need to hear, what the app has determined that you need to hear in order to be motivated. Well, that idea of being motivated to act has to come from somewhere. And Plato and Aristotle and a lot of the ancient Greeks called that dialectic. The idea that we would go back and forth with an argument or a debate about a subject matter so that we could come to the best conclusion possible is what was called dialectic. Not dialect, dialectic, meaning that the process of moving between a minimum of 2 opposites for the purpose of coming to a conclusion about that. Those claims. In a court of law, we're determining basically guilt and innocence, right? And so you have guilt and you have innocence, and they come to meet in the middle here. Those are two opposing but equally forceful concepts, guilt and innocent. And it's at this point in the middle, right here, where they're pushing up against each other, that Aristotle referred to as stasis, S-T-A-S-I-S. That's S-T-A-S-I-S. And some people pronounce it stasis. Either way, I'm fine with it. So that point of stasis is where Aristotle says that rhetoric must begin, that dialectic leaves us with sort of the tension of these two opposing forces that are pinned against each other, if you think about it that way. And in between there is a decision that must be made. And say, for an example, in a court of law, a lawyer, or if you're representing yourself, a client, each of you go sort of back and forth in a debate, questioning, or if there's a full trial, or somehow arguing between the two of you. And then a judge or a jury says, okay, we're at that point of stasis. We need to go decide which way it's going to go. And then they take all of the arguments and which way are they persuaded. Well, that process after stasis, when you come to that point where you have to make a choice, where there's a decision to be made, where there is influence to be had, after you've figured out what the truth is through that process of dialectic, well, that's where rhetoric comes in. Because if we don't share what the conclusions of the dialectical process are, then we're not going to be able to share anything ethically or worthwhile, right? We're definitely not be able to get to the truth if we don't first go through the process of dialectic and come to that point of stasis and make that decision to say guilty or innocent or good or bad or right or wrong, even just to and being able to come to a conclusion between those two, whether that means that you choose one side or the other, or there's some in between sort of decision to be made, whether it's an individual making those decisions or a group of people. That is the process where rhetoric begins. So rhetoric begins at the point of stasis. And the reason that rhetoric is needed is in order to share the truth that you discovered through dialectic. And so as we go through talking about what rhetoric is, and oftentimes by the end of the semester, there's no one answer. I'm sure that that's not surprising to any of you, but we will study people who say they have the answer, or people who are proposing an answer to some of the questions of how we become motivated, how do we influence others through speech and writing, what role do the canons of rhetoric, the rules of rhetoric, play in our ability to influence others. I've been using the word influence a lot, and I always have. In this first time that I talk about rhetoric with anybody, I say, if there's not mass influence, then it is not rhetoric. Interpersonal communication, that small group communication, those communication contexts are where persuasion occurs, but not rhetoric. So what's the difference? The difference is, in fact, the context. The difference is that persuasion can occur in almost any context. But when you're looking to appeal to the masses, when you're looking for mass influence, a large group of people, then you're looking at the art of rhetoric. Which brings up an interesting point. As communication technologies change, so does our language surrounding it. One of the things that has been driving me absolutely nuts is the number of people who are influencers or influencers, whichever way you pronounce it. These influencers are popping up all over the place, and I don't know what their influence is. Like, I'm sure that they have gotten advertising for their channels, or they have taught us something about shopping or makeup or true crime or whatever it is that they've talked to us about. Pinterest, I enjoy. For some reason, me and Instagram just aren't good friends. I don't like Instagram. I, I don't really understand it, but what I do know is that the people who use it for the purpose of influencing others are practicing the art of rhetoric, be that through visuals or through language, through presentation, or through writing. So rhetoric is actually something that more and more we're encountering, because as a society, we're more and more influenced by one person behind a video camera with one of those ring lights, that's shining on you, and making sure that you get the brightness right. I mean, I look a little washed out, but hey, at least you can see me, which is a big step up from last semester when I didn't have enough lighting and kept trying to record these videos. So these are people who, some of them make a profession out of it. And we respond to that. And so it's sort of like a big marketing game, right? Like, but for our own personal style, I guess. Me, I like to watch TikToks of funny lizards, and I like to watch, obviously, all furry animals are adorable and fun. But the internet has been more to me than just a marketplace for things. Do-it-yourself crafts from Dollar Tree, or how to put on your makeup so you don't look 50, or I don't know, what are some of the other ones? What perfume, what clothes you should buy, excuse me, what makeup you should buy, what new drones you should buy, how to get your garage door opener linked to your car, which took me 5 YouTube videos, but eventually I got it. So we go to the internet to be influenced, right? We go to the internet to be influenced. That's the whole point of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, right? How many tweets did I get? How many likes did I get for that tweet? I have no idea. All I know is that one of the true crime podcasts I listen to, the guys who do it, they and I tweet at each other all the time, and I feel really important because I'm on Twitter tweeting with the guys who I listen to every week talking about true crimes. Like, somehow they're celebrities. In fact, if you go online and you want to say, look up who was born on my birthday that's famous, oftentimes I pull that up, and it used to be like 2 people, like Judy Garland and I forget who the other person is, who share my birthday. And then one day I go back to it, and Judy Garland's way down at the bottom. And there's a bunch of names from the top down, like 13-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, who apparently are YouTube stars or influencers or whatever, TikTok stars, whatever it is that we want to label them as. Apparently they are stars. What do we mean by that? We mean that they influence a lot of people. They motivate a lot of people. Me, again, you're going to find me with 3 kinds of videos, true crime videos or scary videos or whatnot. Also lizard videos, particularly leopard geckos. And then finally, you will find me looking at Dollar Tree DIY decor videos. And I could go down a rabbit hole with just those 3 things on just one channel, like just YouTube or just TikTok or just Pinterest. And I have all of them, but I can't tell you the last time I opened up Instagram or Pinterest, right? Facebook is a place where I feel like everybody can contact me. I have a public page. Whatever, come at me. Find out whatever you want to find out about me. I put personal stuff up there, I put professional stuff up there. Obviously not professional stuff that I want students to receive, no, but it's, professional exchanges of how to get more information, let's say about a new teaching technique or solving a teaching or a classroom problem, etc. I would not advocate that anybody say that their Facebook page is their professional profile. Certainly that should never be the case. But all of those are what we used to call I-news. I-news, the idea that one person could send the story that they're experiencing right then and there out to everybody, was really new in 2000. That was really new. I know it's hard to believe. It's even harder for me to believe that it was 22 years ago. But 2000 was when we made that turn, where we started getting our news from individuals standing in the hurricane, talking about it, using their phones, using their cameras, whatever it is that they were using, posting it particularly to YouTube, which has been around, it feels like forever. And now we can light things properly. We can be journalists. If we happen to be in the right place at the right time, we can do that now. I don't know how we would have done that in the 90s with a VCR cam, I guess. I'm not really sure. So today we have a greater need to understand the messages that we're receiving, particularly when they're a part of a mass influence campaign. All right. So the difference between persuasion and rhetoric is in that little bit of with mass influence, with the intent of mass influence. That is what separates rhetoric from persuasion. Persuasion can be it can appear anywhere, but rhetoric can really only appear when there's mass influence. Now, Aristotle and some others will take that a step further and say it's about mass influence in how the citizenry works, or how citizens participate or don't participate in their government. And to some extent, I feel like that's definitely where this all started, and it's definitely true. But rhetoric is not about politics anymore. How did it get that reputation? Well, when we get past some of the sophists like Gorgias and others, we will get into Aristotle. And he was really the one who said there's only 3 occasions for which require rhetoric. One of those is ceremonial. So graduations, weddings, funerals, etc. Those are cause for speech making. Those are cause for influence. Okay. And then you have in Congress or in deliberating in our government, that's pretty straightforward, I think. And then we have the courtroom or public opinion these days, where, you've heard maybe people going to trial in the court of public opinion as opposed to a courtroom. What do we mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is that we're not there, we're not on the jury, but we have our opinion about what we believe to be true. I mean, most of us still, I say us, I know a lot of people who still think that O.J. Simpson is guilty for killing his wife and her boyfriend, ex-wife and her boyfriend. I believe a large group of the people I know believe that Casey Anthony was guilty. It's like, how could you come to any other conclusion? Well, it's pretty easy. The people that were on the jury and in the courtroom heard things different and differently. They were presented to them differently. We never saw the murder photos from the OJ trial. We don't really know what Casey Anthony was doing with her daughter. We don't have all of these little pieces of detail that can greatly influence the message that needs to be sent. And so sometimes we get the opposite answer. And, that's the way public communication, mass communication works. I don't think it surprises anybody to know that I don't beam a message to you and you receive it and that's that. We have gotten past that, thank goodness. I think you have to go back to about the 1950s to start looking at that model for communication. We now know that we all bring a lot to the communication experience. And so audiences, they bring all of their individual stuff with them to that audience. And somehow we have to figure out how to not just get them to listen to us and pay attention and talk to them, but we also somehow motivate them to do something. And how do you do that when you have all these different people with different motivations on a regular basis? And that is what a good rhetorician does. They find all those opportunities for making sure that everybody in the audience, or most of the audience, can be motivated. Maybe there's one value that we all have and we all share in that context. And so we grab onto that. Or perhaps there is that, particularly, let's say, for example, in a specific setting, let's say the classroom, my goal is not to whip you up into a frenzy, right? My goal is to get you as much information for you to think about what you're hearing and seeing and reading so that you can make a good choice about what to do with that information. So I remember, man, this probably was a decade ago. I had a student in 350 and she was working full-time at a PR firm in town. And she said the one day, she goes, "Dr. Ganache, I just got off work." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. What's up?" She goes, "Well, my boss held me up because he said," I mean, she was on time for class, but I guess she felt she was running behind. "But my boss pulled me aside and said, 'Why do you have to go take a class in lying anyway?'" And therein lies the problem for almost all rhetoric teachers, whether they're in English departments or communication departments. And that is that people view rhetoric as empty, flowery language, or as things that people say that they really don't mean, or doublespeak, or talking out of both sides of your mouth, or flat out lying. And hopefully what you'll learn by the end of the semester is that most of the rhetorical theorists who write on the subject will tell you, if you're not telling the truth as much as we can get to the truth, if you're misrepresenting something, if you're lying, then you're not practicing rhetoric, because rhetoric is about sharing the truths that we come to terms with. Now, that might sound familiar to you. Does it sound familiar, the idea of two opposite sides debating each other to come to the best solution? It should, because that's exactly what the American democracy, the United States democracy, was based on. You know how we're always like complaining because the Republicans and the Democrats are fighting back and forth? Well, it used to be a legit fight. It used to be about policy. It used to be about, you have ideas, I have ideas. Some of mine are good, some of yours are good, some of mine aren't great, some of yours aren't great. Let's figure out what the best answer is. That's how that was supposed to work. And it did for a long time. And now it's not working so well. And, there's so many people working on this. There are Congress people and people just working in the Capitol and people outside of the Capitol in their home states who are just really praying that we can find solutions to the things that divide the Democrats and Republicans. It used to be, well, we all want America to succeed, so let's roll. But how America would succeed has become the problem. And that's why we, see things like the January 6th riot from last year and claims of ballot issues and claims about, scary claims about healthcare, about taxes, about Social Security, and so on. Sure, those are social issues that the government sticks its head into, and we know this. Now, you don't have to agree or disagree with whether or not the government should be involved, but that debate does not need to happen for us. But we know that there is definitely a divide, and we know that there are definitely at least two sides to almost every debate that's had. And so in the beginning, when we're talking about the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, the link between rhetoric and a governmental system is extremely important. In fact, all the way until about the Renaissances is, all about the relationship between rhetoric and the government, or rhetoric and power. Who's in power? So what we're going to study this semester is not as boring as you might think, and it does have practical application for you. If you are a PR person, particularly, obviously, managing campaigns is something that you will be doing. Marketing campaigns are different from political campaigns. But the first public relations guy, and his name just escaped me, Bernays, thank you. I don't know why I'm saying thank you. I just remembered. But Bernays was the first one to write specifically about the idea of public relations in terms of propaganda, in terms of advertising, in terms of rhetoric. And the obvious answer, by the way, is that you look, a public relations person might look at a market, might look at an advertising campaign and say, how will this reach the most people? In other words, how do we get the most influence out of what it is that we're doing? And by the way, if it's free, that's even better, right? So whether you are interested in health policy, health issues, whether you're interested in big corporations, organizational strategies, and management strategies, whether you're interested in the political system or anti-establishmentism, whatever it is that you're into, I'm hoping we can find something for you over the course of the next semester. I do need to ask you all a favor, and that is to be patient until about the Middle Ages. Why? Because this stuff will put you to sleep. I know that. So what I always do is I hope that you all will go through the book, and I will tell you the most important readings for you, and I'll tell you about some that you can sort of peruse, look maybe at the main headings or something. But there is a lot of reading. And part of the reason for that is because we think we know what it is that we're talking about, but you don't yet. If you did, you wouldn't need to be here. So it's important for all of us as we look at the basic strategies of communication, particularly persuasion, that we understand the theoretical principles that helped us develop as communicative people, especially on the mass influence level. All right, so that gives you a little preview of what's coming. I'm going to post for you at some point this week, I think, a picture. It's hand-drawn, it's sloppy, but it's a timeline that a student drew several years ago, and the class at that time really responded very well to it. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that up for you guys as well. I find that at the beginning of the semester, if you have a timeline to see where we're going, sometimes that's helpful. Or when you're reading, to put that into the context of the timeline is sometimes helpful as well. So hopefully this will be a learning aid for you. It's certainly not something you need to memorize or anything like that. I will tell you about the main themes that are important to know, but for the most part, this is a guide for you. So I'll get that up there sometime. Let's see, it is Wednesday. It's only Wednesday. So Thursday or Friday, somewhere in there. Meanwhile, I have put up a discussion post for you, just asking you to tell me what your response to the word rhetoric is before we get too deep into anything. Just what do you think of when you hear the term rhetoric? Where do you hear it? What does it mean? I guarantee you that TikTok is not using the word rhetoric too often. However, I have seen some really good videos that reference things like stasis, or the very fun word of enthymeme. You don't have to worry about that one for like 3 weeks. But you'll see these words pop up. And sometimes every now and then there's someone who decides it's fun to put an educational or an academic TikTok up. And that's always a good time for me, especially when it references argument. Because what is stasis if it's not the point at which we decide which argument we're going to make? So this is, when I say an argument, tell me what your argument is. What I'm really asking you for is your claim. What is it that you're claiming? In the course of studying rhetoric, we're also going to study where those claims come from. How do we use evidence to make claims? What sort of strategy can we use to make claims? Where does the reasoning come in? When do we talk about how we came to our conclusion? And when do we just give our conclusions, our claims? A lot of you probably hear claims every day that have no grounding in any data or experience or anything other than I just feel like saying that. We hear them all the time. It's not that it's just I feel like saying that. It's not uninformed necessarily. It's just that there are certain situations in which you don't need to know the reasons why. If you're wondering when those situations occur, I can give you an interpersonal example. Where I come from, at least, we don't, say to somebody who's next to us, hey, listen, it's almost noon and my stomach's making this rumbly sound. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I'm assuming it's empty and it needs food in order to stop rumbling. Would you like to go get something to eat with me? That's not, we look at you and go, gee, Chet? No? All right, let's go. I mean, there's not a huge debate there or a huge amount of reasoning that needs to be provided for someone who asks you to lunch. I think the obvious implication is that somebody's hungry and maybe just wants company. Who knows? But when we're talking about on the mass influence level, the ability to explain the reasoning behind our claims becomes so much more important. And as you all know, you've heard words like crisis of science, anti-science, reason, just the opposite of reason, unreasonable. How did you come to that conclusion? I just decided that's the conclusion. Well, there's got to be a process that gets us to that conclusion. We're going to talk about that too over the course of the next semester. So start your reading if you haven't already. Every week you have reading because I am that evil. This time around, you're reading, I believe, Gorgias's Enchonium on Helen. And then after that, I think we go to Isocrates. And all three of those pieces are very, very short. So that's the good news. They're short. They might be written in what feels like a language we don't understand, but I promise you it's English. So have fun reading. Have fun typing up a little discussion post for me. I give you a week to do that. So anytime between now and next Wednesday at 11 p.m., you can answer it. And no, I'm not looking for a long, expanded answer. Just simple discussion board, short paragraph answer is fine. So hopefully, though, this exercise will help you in determining how you personally are going to tackle this class. And of course, as always, if there's questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, just let me know via email or text, and I will get back to you. I think I've kept up all the way to day 2. We'll see what happens on day 3. I'll have a happy Wednesday. I'll be talking to you soon.